All right, welcome. It's a couple, what? It's a couple minutes after 8, so I think we'll get started. I just want to say hello to everybody and thank you all for joining tonight. It just makes me happy to see your faces, the ones that I can see, since I haven't seen a lot of you in a long time. So this is our third of 6 CBS Women Insight classes that we're doing this fall. And tonight we're going to be talking about our bodies. So at our first meeting, we spoke about preserving our mental health through this pandemic. And tonight we're actually going to talk about our physical health. And of course that will touch on our mental health as well, but primarily about our physical health and taking care of ourselves and what we can do. So I'll give you the order of events. We're going to start by welcoming a very special guest, and then we'll have some opportunity for some Q&A with her. And then we're going to do some learning about what Jewish tradition says about taking care of ourselves. And then we'll conclude with my other favorite traditional prayer. So last week I shared the Rosh Chodesh prayer with you, and this week I get to share my other favorite tefillah. So I think Nava is going to mute everyone, or you can mute yourselves, and she will keep the chat open for questions. Just, you know, I ask the obvious, just use the chat for when, you know, it's appropriate during our presentation. So tonight we are welcoming Melissa Rosen, who is the Director of Training and Education at Sharsheret, which is the only national organization supporting Jewish women and their families of all backgrounds facing breast and ovarian cancer. So at Sharsheret, Melissa oversees community education throughout the country. She trains healthcare professionals and Jewish professionals and Sharsheret's own volunteers. She also manages the Sharsheret Supports Partnership Program. She holds a master's degree in Jewish communal service from Brandeis University, and she's been working in the nonprofit sector for more than 30 years. She herself is a 2-time cancer survivor, and she is passionate about the Jewish community and cancer support and advocacy. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to all of you for coming to hear about such an important topic. So I'm going to do a few things tonight, and we're a group that can have a conversation, right? This doesn't, you know, certainly you can put questions in the chat, but if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. If yes, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. But tonight I'm going to introduce you to Sharsheret. How many of you, for those of you who I can see on the screen, are familiar with Sharsheret before this event? Okay, so I'm good, or the thumbs up. Thank you, Amelia. So I'm glad that I'm here then, so I can introduce you to this amazing organization. We're also going to talk about why breast cancer is a Jewish issue, how to determine personal risk, manage it, and most importantly, mitigate it, and kind of do this a little bit through the lens of the pandemic. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, as Vicki said, we are a Jewish organization, the only Jewish organization that focuses on breast and ovarian cancer, as well as genetic mutations that raise our risk for a diagnosis. And we do that in a lot of ways, and in a little bit, I'll tell you more about Sharsheret. I'm really proud to share that information. But you know, one of the questions that we get so often is, oh my gosh, there's so many great cancer organizations. Why do we need a Jewish cancer organization? There's Komen, there's American, Cancer Society, and so many more. Sharsheret's been around for 20 years, hard to believe, but 20 years. And again, we're providing support nationally and at this point, internationally, although that happened organically. And there are 2 reasons that still today, 20 years later, we need a Jewish organization as we did when we began. So the first is very specific. It is about genetics. Jews of Ashkenazi descent carry certain mutations at a much greater rate. And so we need to educate our community differently than a person might hear on the news or see online or something like that. So that's one reason. And the second reason is that no matter the illness, no matter a person's identity, everybody deserves culturally competent care when they are ill. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But so sometimes people will say to me, well, what does that even mean, culturally competent care? And what's interesting is that study after study has shown that patients, any patient whose non-medical needs are met, have better medical outcomes. And so when we think of non-medical needs, very often we think of finances and childcare and things like that, and those are important needs. But what people often forget is that religion and culture are also non-medical needs, and that cancer isn't just a physical experience, but it's also a psychosocial or emotional experience, and it can be a spiritual experience too. And so we need to help people meet those needs. So what are some examples of that? I'll just give you two. We just finished the Chagim and the high holiday season. And every year, without fail, we get a few phone calls from women who have been diagnosed and are really struggling about attending services. Now, this has nothing to do with the pandemic. This has to do with part of our liturgy, right? Every year we go to synagogue, we go to shul on the high holidays, and we say the Unatana Tokef. We say, who shall live and who shall die? And most of us say it because we said it the year before and the year before and the year before. And although we're supposed to be thinking deeply about what we say, doesn't always happen. It's a long day. There's a lot on our minds. And so we just say it because they're words. But if you've been diagnosed with a life-altering and potentially life-threatening illness, to say who shall live and who shall die changes dramatically. And so people are afraid to go and say something like that. And yet, all of a sudden, those words have so much meaning. And this is when we're praying, we're davening to be sealed in the book of life, that they feel like they can't not go also. And it's a real conflict for them. So you're not going to get that kind of conversation at the American Cancer Society. There are many, many others, but we don't have a lot of time. So I just wanted to give you one example. A little more about Sharsheret. We help all women, no matter their relationship to Judaism, and even if they don't have a relationship to Judaism. About 20% of the women and families we help have no connection to Judaism. Our programs are open to all. We have no religious agenda. We take every person as they are and offer them the support that they want at any given time. We also help women and families, no matter the stage that they're at. Perhaps they, perhaps they haven't been diagnosed, but they're concerned about genetics, or they're in the middle of the diagnostic process in treatment. Maybe they're dealing with a metastatic diagnosis, or maybe they're in survivorship, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years, and longer. We have programs that help them navigate that entire experience. Sharsheret it's great to think of us as two buckets. So one is education and awareness, and that's the kind of thing we're doing tonight, as well as my training of healthcare professionals, making sure they provide culturally competent care, and rabbis and other Jewish professionals, making sure they understand the best ways to support congregants or members of the community facing an illness. But we also have this amazing clinical team filled with social workers and a genetic counselor that take calls every day, 9 to 5, any time zone. They'll listen to you. They'll listen to a person vent. They'll provide some guidance, connect to programs, all sorts of things. And the programs they connect to are Sharsheret's formal programs, but also other organizations, because we partner with a lot of cancer organizations. Just a couple of examples include a peer support program, our Busy Box program, which is for families raising young children while dealing with cancer. The child or children get a huge box of toys addressed to them, age appropriate, interest appropriate. And underneath the toys is information for the adults in the house about how to talk to your child about cancer in a developmentally appropriate way. And we have a survivorship program and a program that helps women deal with the cosmetic side effects of treatment. We have a caregivers program and so much more. A question came in asking if we only help women and if it's only breast cancer. So it's breast and ovarian cancer. And do we only help women? Listen, our sweet spot is women with breast or ovarian cancer and their families or with genetic mutations. That being said, we never turn anybody away. Just like we help plenty of women who aren't Jewish, we help women call us all the time with different cancers, with uterine cancer or with a completely unrelated cancer that's not breast or gynecological. And what we'll do is offer them the support we have for them and then connect them to another organization that offers specific help for their cancer. Not just call this organization, but we'll email an introduction so that there's never a lack of support. And we'll do the same thing for men. First of all, our genetic counselor and any of our genetics programs are for men and women. But if a man calls us with a cancer diagnosis, either a breast cancer diagnosis or another BRCA mutation related diagnosis, we can help them with the genetics, we can help them with the Jewish aspect of it, and then we'll connect them. If it's breast cancer, we'll do everything we can, and then we'll introduce them to the Male Breast Cancer Alliance and things like that. So Vicki mentioned that I'm happy to answer more questions about Sharsheret at the end, but I want to get more into the bulk of the main part of it. So Vicki mentioned that I'm a cancer survivor myself, and at Sharsheret, the stories we hear from women are so important to us. It reminds us that what we're doing is so critically important, and we have this thing called Sharsheret stories. And so I want to start by very briefly sharing my Sharsheret story. You also may have Sharsheret stories. Maybe you know someone who was helped by Sharsheret. Maybe you've supported Sharsheret in some way by attending a different program or making a donation, buying a pie during our Thanksgiving pie sale, Pies for Prevention, running a marathon, so many different ways. My Sharsheret story is that I was diagnosed with breast cancer just over 6 years ago. I was actually diagnosed with breast cancer as a direct result of radiation to my chest for a different cancer 17 years prior to that. Because I wasn't working at Sharsheret at the time, I was working in the Jewish community, but not Sharsheret. Because I knew I was at higher risk because of my radiation, my oncologist and I, we came up with a customized plan. I was going to start mammograms earlier than most women do. And after a couple of years of early mammograms, I was going to start having 2 screenings a year, 1 mammogram and 6 months later, an MRI, then a mammogram 6 months later, and then an MRI. And sure enough, my first MRI, the one that was supposed to be my baseline, was actually what diagnosed very early stage breast cancer. I did rely on Sharsheret. I was familiar with it during treatment. And actually, when I was done with my treatment, they advertised for a new position to them. And it kind of felt b'shert, you know, meant to be. And I've been here ever since. And I'm not telling you my story because it's a nice story to hear or anything like that. I'm telling it to you for a very specific reason. The reason is that I knew what needed to be done specifically to manage my risk, to do what was unique to me and how to monitor myself for my needs. And if you learn nothing else from this evening, although I hope you'll learn a lot, but if you learn nothing else, it's that everybody needs to take responsibility for their own health and figure out what their needs are with the help of your doctors. Because I did that ahead of time, I was able to catch my breast cancer at a very early stage and my story has a wonderful ending. And so that's why it's that important. So as we talk about ways to do this, I want to remind you that Sharsheret doesn't offer medical advice. We're not a medical organization where we provide psychosocial or emotional support. We provide education. We're all different, right? And so that's why, because we don't offer this medical, because it would be inappropriate to offer medical advice. That's why I'm asking each of you to learn some medical history about your family and have a conversation with your doctor. So the first thing to do to be proactive is know your family's cancer history. Not just breast or ovarian cancer, any cancer. And ideally, the age of onset, if that's something that you can find out. I am talking about not just immediate family, but cousins and prior generations, if you know. There's actually a biological family tree on the Sharsheret website you can download that will tell you like who you should try and find out if they had cancer diagnosis and what the age of diagnosis was. And you know, the reason I say not just breast and ovarian is because when the BRCA mutation was found, we thought it was a breast cancer mutation, BR breast, CA cancer, but we then quickly learned it also heightened the risk of an ovarian cancer diagnosis. And in the last couple of years, we've learned not just breast and ovarian, but prostate, pancreatic, melanoma, and male breast cancer, which is why I'm going to remind you, not just your maternal side or your sisters or your aunts, but also your paternal side and your brothers, your father, your uncle, your grandfathers. So in let's say all of Texas, if you took everybody, men, women, people of different ages, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people from different faiths, about 1 in 500 would carry what's known as a BRCA mutation, a mutation on one of their 2 BRCA genes. So 1 in 500. For Jews of Ashkenazi descent, that number is not 1 in 500. That number is 1 in 40. And although hereditary breast and ovarian cancer diagnosis are a small percentage of all breast and ovarian cancer diagnosis, if someone does carry that mutation, their lifetime risk is up to 88% for a breast cancer diagnosis versus about 12% in the general community, and about up to 45% for ovarian versus about less than 2 in the general community. So it's important to know what your family history is and determine. That's 1 in 40, not 1 in 4. 1 in 40 is bad enough. 1 in 4 would be horrible. 1 in 40 versus 1 in 500. So again, important to know if your family has a strong cancer history in it. And again, all cancers. So 5 years ago maybe not 5, maybe 8 years ago in my own family, if somebody asked me to name my family's cancer history, it wouldn't have been a red flag. Today, we know it would have been a red flag. On my paternal side, my grandmother had pancreatic, my aunt had breast, and my cousin had ovarian. So like 3 BRCA related cancers right down the line. They apparently don't have a BRCA mutation, and I know I don't. But today that raises a big flag, and there probably is a mutation there that we've yet to identify, and that's what the issue is. So important to have this conversation, and you know, we're just actually a few weeks away from Thanksgiving, and you're all going to gather digitally with your family, sitting around the Zoom table. So I have a recommendation for you. Thanksgiving is actually a time that all genetic organizations encourage families to get to know their history. So The election will be over by then. Hopefully we'll have the results. There's a good chance you're not going to want to talk about politics because families and politics don't mix. So instead, talk about something that could be life-saving. So it's a great time to do it. And I understand every family's different. For some, you could just have a conversation like we're having right now. For others, it might need to be more private, but it's such critically important information. Okay, so first is know your family's cancer history. Second is know what's normal for your own body. Remember, 1 in 8 women with a BRCA mutation or without, with a strong family history or without, will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. So you need to know what's normal for your own body so that you can know if something feels off and take care of it. So just a couple of tips. I really mean be familiar with your whole body, but tonight we're talking a little more about breast cancer. So obviously everybody knows that a lump is something that might be of concern. I say might, and I mean might. Most lumps are not cancer. So if someone finds a lump, please do not panic. Address it, go to the doctor, whatever, but know that most lumps are not cancer. But I also want you to know that it's not just lumps. It could be a change in texture of the skin on the breast. It could be a change in color of the skin on the breast. It could be a change in size, unexpected on one side. And not only that, but it's not just where we think of as breast. It could be above the breast, in the axilla or underarm, and it could be right below as well. The other interesting thing is that I've met enough women who just said, there was nothing obvious. I just didn't feel right. I knew something was off. So keep that in mind as well. So now, once you've done the first two things, you have learned your family's cancer history and you're familiar with your own body and your own medical history, obviously. You need to take this information to a doctor. Might be your OBGYN, might be a primary care physician, might be an oncologist, but not unless you already have an oncologist, so hopefully it won't be an oncologist. Probably the best is the OBGYN. And you need to come up with a customized screening plan based on your risk. First, if you haven't had genetic screening to learn if you carry a BRCA mutation, you may have heard it called a BRCA mutation, then look at that history with your doctor and make a decision. Does it make sense for you to be screened? And likely at this point, it won't just be a BRCA screening, but what's known as a panel, because there are many other mutations that raise risk. Somebody actually asked in the chat room if if lymphoma was a BRCA or similar mutation related cancer, and the answer is, as far as we know, it is not. So once you've decided, again, whether you're going to screen or not, and by the way, if you have questions, because a lot of doctors, genetics isn't their thing, and so if you feel like you're not getting the right information, then reach out to Sharsheret's genetic counselors. The phone call, it's just a phone call away. There's no cost, like all of our programs. They're 100% free. And for people who are trying to decide whether or not they want to be screened, she's a great place to start. She's absolutely wonderful. So once you've decided about genetic mutation screening, you'll decide about breast cancer screening and regular screenings, other types of screenings. It may be that the doctor says, listen, from what I can see and from what you're telling me, you can follow the normal guidelines, start mammograms at 50, do them every other year. But it may be that your doctor wants you to start earlier, start at 40. You may have a higher risk and they'll want not just mammograms, but maybe an occasional MRI. You might have dense breasts and not just a mammogram, but a 3D mammogram and a sonogram. Everybody's plan is going to be a little bit different. And it's really important to keep that in mind and to have that information. So we've done know your family history. We've done know your own body. Let's talk a little bit about healthy living. I will absolutely give a link to the website. Let's talk a little bit about healthy living. So I want you to be proactive about your entire health, not just breast health. And the good news is the few things we're going to talk about tonight, help not just with breast cancer risk reduction, but all cancers, and heart disease, and diabetes, and dementia. These are win-win activities. And I would love for everybody to commit to one of them tonight, you know, to have in your mind, okay, that's one thing I'm going to commit to taking on. So the first thing is simply eat well, right? That doesn't mean you can never have a snack. It means that most of the time when you sit down, the plate in front of you should be filled with whole grains, lean proteins, lots of colorful fruits and veggies. And if you do that most of the time, then you can have whatever, you know, the birthday cake or going out for ice cream or whatever it is. And it's important to not take on anything that's too restrictive, because the reality is those aren't sustainable, and honestly, they're not necessary. Okay, be active. Same thing, I'm not asking you to run a marathon, unless of course you're interested in running a marathon, and then we can talk about Team Sharsheret, but that's another conversation. I'm asking you to move more, to find a friend and take a socially distanced walk every morning, or to gather with your children, your partner, and take a walk after dinner. Park a little farther away in the supermarket. All these take the dog for an extra walk. He or she'll be your best friend because of it, and you'll be healthier also. You know, these are the kind of things we're talking about. And then, although I understand this is hard, 2020 is not the year to ask anybody to embark on a stress reduction plan. But the reality is we need to reduce stress where possible. You know, this may be the year that we need it most of all. And I guess on the upside, so many organizations are offering free online classes for yoga and meditation, breathing exercises, all sorts of things. The interesting thing about these three important behaviors is that whether one carries a BRCA or similar mutation or not, these behaviors reduce risk dramatically. Again, not just for breast cancer, but for all sorts of age-related and un-age-related diseases. And so to commit to them in some small way and to continue to commit to them is really critically important. And the other thing I want to say, and this may be the most important thing as part of this part of the conversation, is as women, we tend to put ourselves right at the bottom of our own to-do list. We're busy. We have work obligations and family commitments, and we've made volunteer commitments to the synagogue and on and on and on. And it's so easy to just keep pushing our needs for self-care down lower and lower and lower. And I want to remind you here tonight that you deserve to be on your own to-do list. It's critically important. And so make those appointments. You've had the conversation with your doctor, whatever the appointment is, for the genetic screening, for a mammogram, for a colonoscopy, for a flu shot, whatever it is, make the appointment and keep it. Don't delay it. So, so important. And I'll reframe it. You know, that in and of itself should be enough of a reminder, but for so many of us, it isn't. So let me reframe it. How can our children, whether they're 3 or 33, know that they're supposed to care for themselves unless they see you caring for yourself? This do as I say, not as I do thing doesn't really work. By telling people, by telling your children, you're going to the doctor, no, nothing's wrong, it's a well check. You know, who said that once we outgrow the pediatrician, we're supposed to stop getting well checks? I can't tell you the number of women I've met who only go to the doctor when they're pregnant. That is not right. That is not right. So don't slink off to go get your mammogram. Tell your family, tell your friends, because they should know that you're caring for yourself, as a reminder that they should be caring for themselves too. It's a modeling behavior, it's a leadership behavior in the community, and critically important. Okay, so all these things that we've talked about really do reduce risk, but they can't prevent all diagnoses. However, should a diagnosis occur, it will help a person be diagnosed sooner, where an earlier diagnosis almost always leads to a better outcome, and may actually allow for a less invasive treatment. And the other thing is that being healthy to start gives you, it gives you the strength to heal. I want to just kind of put this through the gauze of the pandemic that we're going through right now. 2020 has presented us with so many unexpected challenges, and many unexpected connections to the cancer experience. First of all, if nothing else, this year has reminded us all how we need to be proactive about our health. Everything from washing our hands and wearing masks to getting mammograms and things like that. But it is not, one thing it is not is as an excuse to postpone healthy living. You know, in certain parts of the country, routine cancer screenings are down as much as 90%. And the NCI, the National Cancer Institute, just released a study that says that they expect COVID to negatively impact cancer deaths for more than a decade, because people delayed getting screenings, because diagnoses were delayed, or treatment plans needed to be altered at the beginning of the pandemic. What I'll say is that at this point, the medical community across the country knows enough to know how to do this safely. Mammograms were actually screening mammograms, not diagnostic ones where there was a problem we were looking for, but screening mammograms were actually for months put on hold. They're all back to where they should be. They all know exactly how to do it so that you'll be safe and they'll be safe. This is not an excuse to put it off. You know, interestingly enough, this also gives us an opportunity to be aware of those community members who need extra support, not just during the pandemic, but always. People currently facing cancer or any difficult diagnosis are more isolated now than ever due to the risks that they face when they leave home. These are scary times for everybody, but they're even scarier for someone who is immunocompromised. So a reminder to check in with them by phone or email or text, offer to shop for them, offer a door drop for a meal, you know, make them a meal and, you know, what is it, ring and run? That's really what you need to do today. Interestingly enough, another connection is that the cancer experience, in a way, has a lot of similarities to the COVID experience, right? We're all in need of healing now. We've all been through this collective trauma. And just like cancer, healing can be physical for those who are affected by COVID directly. Like I said, we're all living through it, and healing can also be emotional and spiritual. And every person has their own healing needs, but one thing is true for everybody. Healing is not linear, and everyone heals at their own pace. Cancer survivors, cancer thrivers may well have something to teach us all, because they're used to living with uncertainty. They're used to living with concerns about hygiene and germ spread, and maybe time to get some advice from them. With their experience, they might be able to help us learn to live with this new normal we all face. So really what's important is to recognize that when a member of the community is diagnosed with cancer or COVID, the entire community is impacted. And this is particularly true if that person was an active, integral member of the community, but anybody, because illness stirs difficult emotions in all of us, whether it's a feeling of sadness or loss or fear. And the other thing is that we're all kind of, again, I said experiencing that collective trauma, but we're also all mourning that the loss of physical community in the Jewish community, in the Jewish life. And that's something that we're going to need to heal from too. And it may take longer than we hoped, but interesting that there are so many parallels between the cancer and the COVID experience. So I want to finish by encouraging you to start or to continue your Sharsheret story by sharing what you learned tonight with someone you know, by helping to plan a program in a different venue. Definitely, excuse me, definitely go on our website and learn more. Somebody put our website address in there, and I'm going to put my email in there in case you have any questions. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Our Instagram account's actually blowing up. One of my colleagues is really into it, and it's really good right now. And then remember that if someone you know could use support from Sharsheret, share that we exist with a person that might need our help. We're actually not just in Houston. We are a national organization, and all of our support programs have been designed so whether you live in New York City, in Houston, in Ames, Iowa, in a tiny little town or in a huge city, you have equal access to our programs. They happen over the phone. They happen through the mail, online. We're doing telehealth before telehealth became so popular and necessary. And so anybody across the country can access our services. And again, sometimes I'll hear somebody say something like, oh, I wish I had reached out, but I didn't want to I have so much support at home. I didn't want to take support away from someone else who might have needed it more. There is no needed it more at Sharsheret. This is meant for everybody and meant to complement whatever support you have through your family, through your community, through the hospital you're getting your treatment from the local JFS, whatever it is, we complement that. And it's not meant for people who just are without financial resources or without support resources. It has nothing to do with how much support, how much money, how much access you have. It's meant for everybody. And so that's really important to remember. Somebody asked what Sharsheret means. It's a great question. Sharsheret, which is a very difficult name to have for a nonprofit organization, actually is the Hebrew word for chain, as in we're all links in the chain of support. And in fact, our peer supporters are called links and callers. Interestingly enough, and having nothing to do with why Sharsheret is called Sharsheret, it's the word for chain. And in modern Hebrew, the word is used for DNA because it's a chain. It's an interesting thing, but Sharsheret works with people who carry genetic mutations that raise risk and who don't. So not relevant to the thing. And it's difficult because people don't know how to pronounce it. And even worse, people don't know how to spell it because it's just a transliteration. And those can go any which way, but it's a meaningful name. Someone asked, Rosalie asked, is the BRCA gene the main risk for cancers in Ashkenazi Jews, or are there other risk gene carries we carry at higher rates? And is Sharsheret mostly aimed at patients or also family members? So Sharsheret actually, so I'll answer the second question first because it's a simpler answer. Sharsheret has an amazing caregiver support program. But I want to redefine caregiver for you. Caregiver is not just a spouse. A caregiver is a parent, an adult child, a best friend, a colleague. Anybody who's giving support to someone to get through their cancer experience is considered a caregiver. So we have an amazing program where caregivers can call and we'll give very concrete examples of how you can support someone in different situations, depending on what their needs are. Everything from, you know, what to prepare in a go bag for chemotherapy to how to offer support to someone who really is resistant to receiving support. And then we offer caregivers a chance to vent without burdening their loved one so that they have the strength, the koach to continue to support their loved ones. And although we don't work directly with children, we have a lot of resources. We don't work directly with children in a family setting. We have a lot of resources for people to use to talk to children. But we do have children's programming actually through schools, mostly high school and college, but we have one program that's good for younger kids, specifically if somebody's parent in the school has a diagnosis. While I answer your second question, I'm actually gonna look for a sheet that I just put over here that will help me answer it. So BRCA mutations are the mutation that is most common in the Ashkenazi population. That being said, there are other mutations. It is becoming more and more obvious in the Mizrahi and the Sephardi population as well. But BRCA mutations are much more common in the Ashkenazi population than in the general population. There are other genes that commonly carry mutations. I'm not going to find it quickly. That commonly there are other genes that raise risk for breast and ovarian cancer, but also each of these other genes, not quite as high a risk, but each of these other genes also has another cancer associated with it. Either similar ones to BRCA, like prostate, pancreatic, melanoma, things like that. Some of them carry an additional colon cancer risk. Lynch syndrome is more common within the Ashkenazi population. But really, the most common ones are what are known as the founder mutations, 3 mutations on 2 genes. By the way, the purpose, sometimes you'll hear somebody say, oh, I have BRCA. What they really mean is I have a mutation on one of my 2 BRCA genes. We all have BRCA genes, and the purpose of them is to mend small mutations that happen in other genes, as well as to reduce cell proliferation, which is really excess cell growth, which is really what cancer is. So the problem isn't those genes, those are the good guys. The problem is a mutation on those genes. If you decide you want genetic screening, you'll get screened. Every lab offers, most of them at this point, they offer these panels that carry anywhere from 30 to 50 different mutations. And whichever place you go through might be decided by what's in your family. If there's a lot of colon cancer in your family, if there's a lot of breast cancer in your family, they all do slightly different tests. And that's why it's so important to talk to a genetic counselor.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
A lot of information.
It's a lot, but it's great. I really appreciate you giving us our charge. We have very specific things to go and do.
That is
really, and also giving us ideas of how to be a caring community and how to, the importance of reaching out in any time, not just COVID times. And I love what you said about being a role model for your friends and family. I actually got a mammogram recently, and I was at the dinner table and I just, talking to my family, and I'm like, I just had a mammogram today and this is how it went. And it felt a little weird, but I was just like, I got 2 kids sitting there and a husband, and it's important for them to know, and I didn't go into detail.
No, there's no reason to, but you're exactly right. Yeah.
And for everybody in Houston, I went to a place that I'd never been before called Pink Door Imaging, which many of you may have gone to already. And it was a very, very positive, quick, clean experience. It was really, it's a small place, so it felt comfortable, which was very cool. So anyway, we can't thank you enough for being with us. I have a quick, 10-minute learning thing, which
Right.
you're welcome to stay on for, but it's late where you are, so you're absolutely welcome to say goodnight.
I do have to say goodnight, but I want you to know I put my email in the chat, and of course Vicki has it too. If you have any questions about our programs, about something else, please do not hesitate to be in touch. And I also sent Vicki some ideas about how to help local community members in need, so she may be sending that out to you also.
Yep, I have that. I'll share it with you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure meeting all of you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, Nava, we are going to share your screen. Okay, so I hope that was interesting to everybody. I'm just gonna spend 5 or 10 minutes with you talking a little bit more about how important it is to take care of our bodies. Nava, can you spotlight me? Am I spotlighted? I mean, on the side. Okay, cool. So, I mean, as you heard, Melissa was talking about everything that she talked about, and this idea of getting your family history and taking care of yourself has been kind of ingrained in Jewish tradition for as long as there have been Jews. So it's a very prominent, highly valued mitzvah. It's discussed in the beginning of Judaism throughout rabbinic literature. I just took a few samples, a little sampling of them. So I thought I would read them with you and then tell you one story about Hillel, and then we'll conclude with my other favorite prayer. All right. So in Dvarim, there are 2 quotes from Deuteronomy. Take heed of yourself and take care of your lives. Be extremely protective of your lives. Ta'anit 11. The human body is a sanctuary. Eat nutritious meals. This is all in our tradition. It is an especially important mitzvah to wash hands before eating a meal. Maimonides, who was in 12th century thinker, he was a physician himself, said, since maintaining a healthy and sound body is among the ways of God, for one cannot understand or have any knowledge of the Creator if one is ill, therefore one must avoid that which harms the body and accustom oneself to that which is helpful and helps the body become stronger. Rashi, who lived a century before him, was commenting on, it's supposed to be Exodus 15:26, commenting on a verse from Shemot. I am the Lord your healer. It was at the end of a long paragraph, and here God is portraying God's self as a rofeh, as a healer. So Rashi says, I am the Lord your healer, and I teach you the Torah and the commandments in order that you may be saved from these diseases. Like a physician who says to a person, do not eat this thing, lest it will bring you into danger from this illness. So here he's talking about, one interpretation is he's talking about advocating that physicians should place an emphasis on preventative medicine, which of course is, a lot of what we're talking about tonight. Navi, can you scroll up a little? Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, who lived more recently, talked about, not quite, the mitzvah of taking care of oneself. Only if the body is healthy is it an efficient instrument for the spirit's activity. Therefore, you should avoid everything which might possibly injure your health, and the law asks you to be even more circumspect in avoiding the danger to life and limb than in the avoidance of other transgressions. So you can see here, it's a small collection, there are many more, but it's this idea of taking care of your physical health, taking care of your body is like, it's a spiritual endeavor. You're doing this in order to raise yourself spiritually as well. But in Judaism, we don't only put emphasis on the spirit. It is also our physical bodies, which are on loan to us from God as it's framed. What time are we at? Okay, great. Just another couple minutes. If you scroll down, we'll read a little story about Rabbi Hillel. Or scroll so you can see the story about Hillel, Nava. Okay, that's it. Great, thanks. Okay, so in this story, it's talking about the very beginning we don't need to worry about, but it says, this refers to Hillel the elder, who at the time that he was departing from his students would walk with them, right? So they just had this nice learning session together, and then they walk out together and they're chit-chatting. And the students say, Rabbi, where are you walking to? And the Rabbi Hillel says, to fulfill a commandment. And what commandment is this? And he says, to bathe in the bathhouse. And the students say, is that really a commandment? And he gives this comparison. He says to them, yes, just like regarding the statues of kings that are set up in the theaters and circuses, the one who is appointed over them bathes them and scrubs them, and they give him sustenance. And furthermore, he attains status with the leaders of the kingdom. I, who was created in the divine image and form, as it is written, for in the image of God, God made humans, even more so. So basically what he's saying here is he's comparing this religious obligation of the Romans, of the people around him, who keep the statues of their gods pristine. Like we have this obligation of keeping our bodies as beings that are created in the divine image pristine as well. So, like I said earlier, it's tending to our bodies covers everything from knowing our family history to working with your physician in preventive care, exercise, all the things that Melissa mentioned. And it also means that if one does get ill or does have a diagnosis, it means, doing everything that you can to help yourself, because we're charged to do the best we can with what we have. So that's the end of this little learning I want to do with you, but I wanted to share, the last thing I wanted to do is share with you one of my very favorite tefillot, one of my very favorite prayers, which is completely relevant to our subject. So Nava, if you can just scroll to the last page. So this is perfect, thanks. So this is a blessing called, we call it Asher Yatzar, just because it's like the first couple words when you get past the Baruch part. And it's a prayer for the body. We say it every time we leave the bathroom, right? So we're just showing gratitude for our health. And it's very prosaic, it's very poetic. And just like that Rosh Chodesh prayer that we read last week together, the translation is very beautiful and is not a literal translation, but captures perfectly the essence of the prayer. So I thought I would just read that. You can read along with the transliteration. It starts out, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chachma, uvarav nikavim nikavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua, lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im yipateach achad mehem, o yisatem achad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים ולעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. Blessed are you, eternal God, creator of the universe, who has made our bodies in wisdom, creating openings, arteries, glands, and organs, marvelous in structure, intricate in design. Should but one of them, by being blocked or opened, fail to function, it would be difficult to stand before you. Wondrous fashioner and sustainer of life, source of our health and our strength, we give you thanks and praise. And I won't go into all the details of the exact translation, but there are a couple of phrases that I just think are so beautiful. It says, Uvaravo nikavim nikavim chalulim chalulim. Like you don't see that repetition in the translation, but it basically says, and who created nikavim nikavim chalulim chalulim, like the openings and the closings, like the things that are supposed to be opened in our bodies and things are supposed to be closed in our bodies. But it's like by repeating it, nikavim nikavim chalulim chalulim, it's kind of talking about how we have like all of the things in our bodies. And then it says, im yapateach achad mehem, if one of them opens that shouldn't, and oh, yisatem achad mehem, or closes that shouldn't, we couldn't stand before you. We couldn't live. And I find it very, very moving to have this gratitude and this awareness, all throughout the day, essentially. Okay, you can stop sharing the screen, Nava. So that concludes our evening tonight. Karen was not able to be here tonight, so I am, she is a co-president with Lisa Estes, so I'm going to give a couple announcements, and then we can say a little hello and goodbye to everybody, and we'll be on our way. It went a little bit longer than usual, but I hope that's okay with everyone. So the CBS Women Insights program that we're doing now is going to resume on November 15th. In November, we have the 15th and the 22nd. I will let you know what those programs are when I finish securing them. I've been talking to somebody, but she hasn't confirmed with me yet. But between now and the 15th, we have the Jewish Book and Arts Festival, which starts on November 1st and runs through the 22nd of November. And it's going to be amazing. Like, so unusual with being online, but like go to the JCC website because it's fantastic. And I wanted to highlight that CBS Women is sponsoring two programs. One on Wednesday, the 4th of November, Avram Lotek. Why Jews do that? Or 30 questions your rabbi never answered, which I think is really funny because if you want some answers, you can ask the rabbi. I'm totally kidding. I'll ask him for you. And the second one is Joan London is on the 8th, Sunday night, the 8th. Why did I come into this room? A candid conversation about aging. Also, Brish Shalom is sponsoring a program, somebody who grew up in Maryland. And CBS Men's Club is also sponsoring more than one program, I think. I don't have that in front of me, but you're going to get some publicity about all of that. So that is the story. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We'll put you on gallery so I can see you. And if you want to unmute, you can say that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yes,
We enjoyed it.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you,
Can
Vicki.
you send those two, the prayer and the other two things to us?
What's that?
Can you send us the prayer that you read? And also, can you send us the
source
front and
sheet?
back, the source sheet?
The source sheet and the prayer, and also Melissa had sent me a sheet of like tips on caring for others. So she sent me that just a little earlier, so I'll send that out as well.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Miss you all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Miss you too.
Good to see everybody.